Motherhood is not just about the person who gave birth to us, or parenthood, in fact. There's a phrase from the Talmud that I took great comfort in when I was single for the first 55 years of my life, that says, one who teaches is as if they have parented. That teaching and teaching anything, that the teaching that we received just from our milestones is a teaching in and of itself. And I take the privilege of talking about my own mother. My own mother, Bailey Gordon, was born September 5th, 1933. It means she is just shy of her 93rd birthday. And in August, she and my father will have been married for 70 years. And it's not easy being 93 and 92 years old. My mother doesn't know where she is, sometimes doesn't know who her husband is or whether she's married. And I had the opportunity, thank you, Jan, for sending me the video of the speaker you had a few weeks ago about caring communities and caring congregations for those elders with dementia. My mother was not the typical stereotype Jewish mother. She never said, in my memory, eat, you're too skinny. At least not to me. And then there was the time when she came to one of my worship services. They lived far away and very rarely would come to our services. And at the end of the service, she said, "Are they always this long?" And I said, "Well, there are a lot of things to put into it." She said, "Well, you could talk less." And I said, "That's a good idea," and left the room immediately. My mother was the kind of person who people would come to for lots of things, particularly for writing. All my friends before AI would go to her to help write their college essays. And this poem she wrote in 1974 for my bar mitzvah, which was May 4th, 1974, this week, 52 years ago. In your wisdom, God, you renew each day the miracle of creation. Yet we, your children, tend to accept the awesome rise of the warming sun without the courtesy of a silent thanks. So too it is when that first chaste cry of a new human soul pierces our time-misted dreams. We think that the clay is ours to mold, that we will bend its shape and define its form. Perhaps that's why you've given us a time like this, to pause, to reflect, to wonder about the precious uniqueness of every separate being. The tree grows out from the branch in the direction of its own choice, and the child nods to the parent and selects a choice of their own. Perhaps that's why you've given us a time like this, to pause, to reflect, to give thanks, God, that your own parenthood of this humble race has shown how love may ease the path. I have a story now, a real story that I only learned because a man named Lev Rottenberg, born in 1937 from the Ukraine, died of COVID a few years ago. And Lev was born in the Ukraine, and his mother died when he was 12 years old. And he was taken care of by relatives until he became an adult, and those relatives moved to Wharton, Texas. And Lev grew up, became an adult, got a job, and married, and he married a woman named Ludmila, who everyone called Lucy. And Ludmila had high blood pressure. And she was recommended that it might not be safe to have children. But Lev, having lost his mother at an early age, and Ludmila just with the yearn to be a parent, they decided to try. And after 3 months of pregnancy, they lost the baby. She was rushed to the hospital, and they could not save the baby. She was advised not to try again, but she was determined. And they did conceive again. This time she carried the baby for 7 months. And not only could they not save the baby, they could not save the mother. And Lucy passed away, and Lev, having lost the hope of 2 different children and his wife, mourned for his wife. 2 days later, the funeral for his wife, he came home, and when he got home, there was a telephone call. It was the hospital who said, "Your baby didn't die. Your baby didn't die. We thought it had died." But after, and remember, this is like 1950 in the Ukraine, the doctors disposed of the fetus. And a janitor, when cleaning up, heard something in the trash can. Took the baby out of the trash can, and the baby was revived to life. They didn't tell Lev right away, because in case it didn't last, they didn't want him to mourn twice for the same child, and possibly there were some legal issues involved, but now he was the father he wanted to be. And now he had a daughter, and he couldn't care for her. He was a single father all by himself. He couldn't go to work and take care of his child, so he put her in an orphanage. He put her in an orphanage and waited until he made enough money to be able to bring her home. It took 5 years. And little Ella was 5 years old. Ella, who had been named for Lev's mother, who died when he was 12. He took her, and he saved up enough money to come to the States and to reunite with the relatives who had taken care of him. Ella grew, became an engineer, got married, and had children. As I say, I only know this story because he died. And when he died, I got to meet the girl that they call the trash can miracle. I got to meet Ella, who was named after her grandmother, who died when her father was only 12. And I got to meet her daughter, Mila, who was named after her mother, who died giving birth to her. And I got to know Lev posthumously. And Ella and her daughter Mila, because of this strange circumstance of COVID that caused his death. When you do the things and encounter people, they become part of your life. And now that you've heard this story, Lev Rotenberg and his daughter Ella and granddaughter Mila are now part of yours. A story that I read in a book recently called From Pulpit to Couch by Dr. Abraham Twersky. Abraham Twersky he passed away from COVID too a few years ago. Dr. Twersky was the son of a rabbi, a great long line of Hasidic rabbis. If you're familiar with what a Hasidic rabbi is, they're the ones with the long beards and the trench coats and the hats, and he never stopped his Hasidic customs. But he watched his father helping people as they came to visit the rabbi, and he decided he wanted to help people as well, and he became a rabbi. But it was around the late 50s and early 60s when people were seeking help from psychoanalysts rather than from rabbis. So he became a psychiatrist. And he became world-renowned, both for his wise Jewish teachings and for his expertise, particularly in the field of chemical dependency. And it was right around the time when Alcoholics Anonymous was becoming less anonymous and more popular. And he started going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings to learn how to help his patients more. And a woman told him a story about her own life. She and her husband had decided not to have children. They decided not to have children because her husband was an alcoholic, and they decided this would not be a good environment for children. And so they didn't have children. But then her husband went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and after a lot of difficulty, overcame his alcoholism, and they decided to have children. And alas, they could not conceive. And so they decided to adopt, and adopted 2 children from a foreign country, and they became their daughters. But the woman herself was a smoker, and decided that smoking in front of the children would not be healthy either, and so she quit smoking. And when she quit smoking, she got healthier. And when she got healthier, she conceived. And now they're going to be parents finally. And they had a baby boy, and the boy had Down syndrome. And they were devastated. God, how could you do this to us, they said. We did everything right. We quit drinking. We quit smoking. We adopted needy children. And now, this is how we're blessed? And they prayed, and they prayed, and they prayed. And they wanted so much to have a normal child. And as she told this story to Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky, she said, and after so much prayer, our prayer was answered. Well, Dr. Twersky was confused because as an MD, he knew that Down syndrome is not curable. And Rabbi Twersky was confused because as a spiritual man, he knew that God doesn't wave a magic wand and change someone's health condition. And so he asked them, how was it that your prayer was answered? And she said, when we realized we were praying for the wrong thing. We were praying for God to change our child. Instead, God changed us. And we, through those prayers, learned how to embrace our wonderful, different, unique, special son that God has blessed us with. And now a folk tale about a man named, I had to write it down to remember, a man named Oka Tadasuke. Has anyone ever heard that name before? Oka Tadasuke lived around the years 1600 in Japan. And he was known for his wisdom, and some called him the Japanese King Solomon. Now, many of you are probably familiar with the biblical story of 2 women who each had a baby, and one of the babies died, and the women both claimed that the baby who was living was their child, and they took the child to King Solomon. They both had an equal claim, and Solomon said, so only one solution I have, I will cut the baby in half. And when he said that, one of the women said, don't do that. Don't cut the baby in half. Give it to her. And Solomon said, you are the real mother, because no one who's a real mother would put their child in jeopardy. So this same situation came to Oka Tadasuke. There were 2 women who each had a baby at the same time, and one of them was unable to nurse her child. And so the other one agreed to nurse both children, and one of the 2 children died, and one of the women accused the other of switching the babies and claiming it was her own. So Oka Tadasuke had to come up with a solution. He said, I'll cut the baby in half, and the women said, we've heard that before. We read about King Solomon. Don't try that trick on us. So he thought of another solution. He sent one of the women to one side of the room and the other woman to the other side of the room and said, let's see who the baby will crawl to. And the baby crawled to Oga Tadasuke. And he was trying to think of something, and then finally he said, this is my last choice. I am going to make a magical potion, a special tea that will help me see into the future. And I'm going to drink it, and when I drink it, I'll be able to see 1 year into the future, and I will see who this child is truly with. And so he made the potion, he drank it, and he fell over and convulsed and shook, and everyone was concerned, what's happening to him? And when he finally stopped shaking, he opened his eyes and he said, I made a mistake. I made the potion too strong. I didn't see just 1 year into the future. I saw 20 years into the future. And what I saw in the future, I don't think you want to hear. And they said, yes, tell us. What was it? And he said, well, this child grew into a young man, and at the age of 20, started to get into trouble. And when he was in trouble, he was accused of a horrible crime, and he was arrested and put into prison. And the family was so disgraced, they had to sell all their merchandise. And they were disgraced enough that they were planning to leave town. And as he continued, one of the women said, stop, the baby's really hers. And he said, yes, you're right, but let me finish. And after a little while, somebody else confessed to the crime that the young man was accused of. And the village came together, and they replaced everything from the family, and they made them an honored family, and the child grew up to be a respected member of the community. And of course, you're absolutely right that it was not your child, because no mother, regardless of the circumstance, would ever deny their own child. In your wisdom, God, you renew each day the miracle of creation. Yet we, your children, tend to accept the awesome rise of the warming sun without the courtesy of a silent thanks. So too it is when that first chaste cry of a new human soul pierces our time-misted dreams. We think that the clay is ours to mold, that we will bend its shape and define its form. Perhaps that's why you've given us a time like this, to pause, to reflect, to wonder about the precious uniqueness of every separate being. The tree grows out from the branch in the direction of its own choice, and the child nods to the parent, selecting their own choice. As mothers and as fathers, we acknowledge that too as a miracle, and offer thanks, God, that your parenthood of this humble race has shown how love may ease the past.